And you're on to catch up with the sun, but it's sinking and racing around to come up behind you again. The sign's the same in a relative way, but you're older, shorter of breath, and one day closer to death. Every year is getting shorter, never seem to find the time. Plans that either come to nothing or half a page of scribbled lines, hanging on in quiet desperation is the English way. The time is gone, the song is over. Thought I had something more to say. Home again. I like to be here when I can, and when I come home cold and tired, it's good to warm my bones beside a fire. Far away across the field, the tolling of the iron bell calls the faithful to their knees to hear the softly spoken magic spells.
Good afternoon, everybody. We're going to be getting started in just a moment, so if everybody can take their seats, I'm going to welcome our panel up to the stage. Thank you. Wow, it looks like standing room only at the back. Thank you so much. It's brilliant to see such a packed room today for what is a very important moment, because I think just a few minutes ago our report went live to the public online, and you are our second audience to hear directly from the task force today. This morning was the media, and I'm really looking forward to sharing those findings with you. In a short moment, I'm going to hand over to our sponsoring minister, Deputy Helen Miles, who will say a few words, and then Deputy Louise Doublé too. But I just wanted to give a little context on this. As chair of the independent task force looking at violence against women and girls in Jersey. Violence against women and girls, as we all know, is an important and worrying global issue. We now know, thanks to our research, that this is also very clearly an important and worrying issue here in Jersey. There will be many jurisdictions around the world watching Jersey over the coming weeks, interested to read our research and recommendations, and interested in our response to those findings. How will we as a community choose to respond? Because in my view, it is very much a choice. Will we choose to really listen to the voices in our research, especially those of victims and survivors, before we judge and defend? I truly hope so. Or will we decide that we're already doing enough, or that it's too difficult or expensive to open ourselves up to further scrutiny and change? Or will we choose to aim high and really make the safety of all women and girls a priority in our community? The headline that I would dearly love to read over the next few weeks and months, and I'm hoping that you will help us make this a reality, is this one. And in a few minutes, I will be sharing our findings and explaining why I actually think this headline, that Jersey can be a world leader in eliminating violence against women and girls, is a possibility, thanks to the starting platform of this research. Before I go into the findings, I'm going to hand over to Deputy Miles. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. Although this task force was established during my term of office and I am sponsoring the work, I want to recognise that this came about as a result of an amendment from Conitell, Karen Shenton Stone of St Martin. And it was that decision that has made this task force and the resulting report possible. I also want to express my sincere gratitude to the Independent Jersey Violence Against Women and Girls Task Force for their diligence, commitment and hard work, bringing together a very comprehensive report to challenge gender-based violence in Jersey. The bravery and courage of the victim survivors who have come forward to share their deeply personal and often painful stories cannot be understated. Their voices have been central to this report, and to them I extend my heartfelt thanks. I acknowledge the importance of this report, not only uncovering the harsh realities that many women and girls face, but also in proposing recommendations to combat violence and support those who have suffered. As the Minister for Justice and Home Affairs, I can assure you all that we will carefully consider these findings and the 77 recommendations. Our focus will be to understand how we can implement meaningful, effective and long-lasting cultural change. This will require a significant shift in community attitudes towards women, substantial efforts to improve understanding and recognition of this violence, the development of transparency and accountability mechanisms, and potentially very radical change to the way systems currently respond to this problem in Jersey. Some of these changes will require dedicated resource, and I undertake to source these resources. I'm committed to creating a safe and supportive environment for all women and girls in Jersey, and I'll now take the necessary time to very carefully review the recommendations to ensure that future action makes a positive difference to the lives of islanders. So once again, I extend my gratitude to the task force and to the victim survivors who have so courageously shared their stories. I am listening and your voices are heard. So I'm now going to hand over to my Assistant Minister, Deputy Louise Doublé, who has delegated responsibility for gender-based violence within the Justice and Home Affairs portfolio. And thank you for attending today.
Thank you, Minister. As the Assistant Minister for Justice and Home Affairs and sharing joint responsibility for equity, diversity and inclusion with my fellow Assistant Minister, Deputy Hilary Jearn, I welcome the publication of this report today, and I want to echo everything that the Minister said in praise of the task force and its chair. Kate's independence and integrity has been a key driving force. Likewise, I'm heartened to be working for a minister and with my fellow assistant minister who both deeply understand these issues, and together we have already been making improvements. I've known Kate for quite some time, and she has asked me to give some context into the campaigning work towards tackling violence against women and girls over the years. And over the last decade, I have tried to be an advocate against the abuse and violence perpetrated on women and girls. Indeed, in my first year as an elected member, I worked with Deputy Carolyn Labby and the Commonwealth Women Parliamentarians to seek the publication of data for the first time in Jersey on the levels of violence against women. As part of that work with the CWP, we learnt that gender inequality is the primary driver of violence against women, and this fact is very much highlighted in the report before us today. The issues highlighted in the report have been repeatedly brought to my attention and to other states members, many of whom I see here today from the backbenchers and the executive alike, and who have campaigned for change alongside me over the years. 2 years ago, I co-authored a letter to the previous Home Affairs Minister, which was co-signed by several other states members, including Deputy Mary Lehegrat, who I believe is here today, Constable Shenton Stone, Deputy Ina Gardiner, who is now the Education Minister, and the then Senator Christina Moore, who is of course our current Chief Minister. In that letter, we called for a survey of women and cross-departmental work to tackle the issues raised. I was absolutely delighted that Constable Shenton Stone managed to secure the funding for this. And seeing Kate Wright as the independent chair, along with the expert task force members and the dedicated officers and researchers producing this document, I have been waiting for its publication. And I find that it's not just a document. To me, this must be a watershed moment for Jersey. I'm proud to be part of a States Assembly and a government that will pay urgent attention to tackling these issues. The report is titled, "It's a Hidden Problem." And indeed, it can be, but the report itself shines a light on these issues. And today I am calling on states members across scrutiny, the executive, constables and deputies to welcome this report, to read it, and to join me in tackling the issues raised. It is deeply troubling to me that the majority of women and girls in Jersey who responded to this study have experienced some form of violence or abuse, 97%. This is a stark reminder that a massive culture change is urgently needed. Something that I want to highlight is that 1,800 children and young people gave their views to the task force, and I absolutely applaud the task force for hearing the voices of that many children. And it was also quite evenly split between girls and boys. The appendix report, which in itself is a considerable volume, is called Picturesque and Picture Perfect, ? It's also a must-read, and the voice of children and young people feature prominently in this. One of the facts I learned from this is that 52% of the girls surveyed had already, as girls, as children, experienced some form of abuse or violence. This is unacceptable. To every girl who has already experienced violence, abuse or harassment, even before reaching adulthood, I would like to say that I hear you, I believe you, and I take all levels of violence against women and girls extremely seriously. And I want to assure everybody that these children's voices are being heard and that we are committed to making a positive difference. Encouragingly, there are many men in this room today, and I recognise that men are our allies in this fight. It is crucial that we stand side by side with men to tackle violence against women and girls. Men who have the confidence to call out bad behaviour and attitudes in their peers can help build a culture that protects women and girls. This report provides a roadmap. As the Minister said, it will not be easy or quick, but change must happen. My commitment and our commitment is to review these recommendations, to drive forward as many as we can. I have already tabled these reports in ministerial meetings in both the departments that I help to lead, and work is already underway by officers to produce a prioritisation schedule. There must be decisive action in every sphere of our community, not just in government, but the courts, the States Assembly, workplaces, schools and homes. Every individual has a role to play. And finally, to the victim survivors, some of whose accounts moved me to tears. Your courage is humbling, and your words have been listened to. You will not be forgotten. Your voices are fundamental in driving the change that we wish to see.
Thank you very much, Deputy Miles and Deputy Dublé, for those very eloquent and moving words. We're going to move on in a second to an equally moving video before I get into the findings. It's a video I'm really proud of, actually, and it brings some very important voices into this room, those voices of victim survivors who've contributed to our evidence. It's hard-hitting. It's not an easy watch, and indeed some of the findings that I'm going to share today are really hard to listen to, and I'm very conscious that there may be people in the room for whom it is difficult. You may have experienced yourself that this is upsetting to hear. Please, if you need to leave the room, please do. At the back of the summary report, there is a long list of amazing support services available. So please don't be afraid to follow up with them after this event if you need to. But without further ado, I am going to show you our video. Thank you very much. A year ago, the Taskforce were charged with achieving two objectives. One was to explore the nature, the extent, the context of violence against women and girls in Jersey. The second was to provide findings and recommendations to government to help eliminate all forms of violence against women and girls across our island. Our research has been really broad and really deep across the entire system in Jersey. It recommends many changes that we need to see to reduce violence against women and girls. We all have a role in recognising, understanding and challenging abusive behaviour towards women and girls when we see it. We all need to want to see that change.
The rows were petty but constant and eroded my ability to define what was reasonable, normal, healthy. His mother joined in. I was wearing the wrong clothes, had looked someone the wrong way, and been too flirty, too cold, too loud. I'd put the wrong tomatoes in the dinner. I was a gold digger, despite being the higher earner, and I didn't keep the house right or defer to him enough. It was so gradual, though, that I wasn't fully aware of how abusive it had all become.
He would make me feel like I was the most important person in his life 1 minute, and then talk to me like I was dirty the next. He would belittle me in front of our friends and family, and it became more and more regular. He would expect a certain lifestyle he wasn't able to fund, and would guilt-trip me into giving him money a week after he got paid so he could go and get drunk with his friends. He would tell me if I didn't have sex with him, he would get it elsewhere. Some nights he would come home and lay into me about whatever it was I hadn't done well enough, like loading the dishwasher wrong. I would often pretend to be sleeping when he came home. On other occasions, I'd sit outside the bedroom and wait until he fell asleep before going to bed. I lived a life of walking on eggshells, and I didn't know one day to the next what he was going to do.
The findings have been very stark. The amount of people who have experienced harassment living here in Jersey has been even more than we would have expected. And also the mechanism for women and girls to report and get something done about what they've experienced is lacking in so many areas, which we knew anecdotally that there would be some deficiencies, but the amount of them and the breadth of them is something that has really worried us.
It's the level of VAWG being experienced by our children and young people. I think that surprised me from the findings and concerned me. What we're seeing is the high levels of misogyny, the messages that our children are receiving from a very, very young age, rather than receiving messages of empowerment and safety.
What stands out most for me in the findings is that the recommendations really do affect us all. Every single person who reads this report can take something from it, can do something to understand what's acceptable, what's not, and how to make a change so that people are safe.
One of the things that really stood out to me actually is just how pervasive, how common violence against women and girls still is across our society. It's such a common feature of the lives of most women and girls that it's simply the wallpaper to our lives.
Soon he was regularly physically abusive, drinking an entire bottle of Southern Comfort each night, plus beers. I had bald patches where my hair had been pulled out, bruises up and down my arms and legs, could barely look anyone in the eye without my heart racing. Something inside me had broken, and despite being unable to identify exactly when I had finally had enough, I knew I was ready to tell him I was leaving. He retaliated by hitting me whilst I held my son, something he had never done before, knocking us on the floor before taking my son from me, throwing me through the front doorway, kicking me further into the hallway before slamming the front door on my head that still lay in the doorframe and stamping on my spine for good measure. I called my last friend for help. It was both awful and a relief that she knew instantly what must have happened and came immediately to get me out and take me to the hospital. They were unable to get my son though, and there was a standoff with police to get him to safety. I was taken to the women's refuge and began the road to rebuilding my life.
After suffering 13 years of verbal, physical, financial and sexual abuse, I finally made the decision to leave my husband. This led to an escalation of unpredictable behaviour which resulted in 7 major incidents being logged with the police. These were everything from forced entry to my home, assaulting me in front of my then 4-year-old son, threatening sexual violence to 2 of my co-workers, attempting to run me over when I refused to get in his car, and the list goes on. After 4 years of therapy, I was strong enough to report the sexual assault to the police. I showed them all the texts between me and my ex-husband and him confirming we had sex. Statements were taken from my friends, confirming my levels of intoxication, and it was even supported by social media pictures, but sadly, this was not enough for a conviction. After several months of waiting resulting in very serious and ongoing health issues, it still wasn't enough. This pattern of activity, I have learned, is all too common in Jersey, and there are many just like me that have survived these awful experiences, and we will never get justice. How bad does abuse have to get when even rape is not enough?
This work is very important because we, Caritas, and our partner charities and agencies have seen the real trauma that so many women and girls have experienced here.
On a professional level, this will really help me deliver the strategy, the child sexual abuse and exploitation strategy. And then on a personal level, I'm female, I'm a mum of 2 daughters. I need to see change for them for the future. This can't continue.
I would like to see this work and the recommendations brought about from this report to make Jersey a safer place for everybody who lives and works in our island community. We all have a part to play in this. We can all help.
The Taskforce would love to see government and key stakeholders adopt all 80 of our recommendations. Regardless I really believe we have a fantastic opportunity, each and every one of us across the community, in whatever way we can become involved, in whatever way we can change mindsets, in whatever way we can reshape our part of the system. We have a fantastic chance now to reduce violence against women and girls, and if we choose to, actually become a world leader in eliminating violence against women and girls. Seen that video a few times now, and it's still really hard to follow it. It's powerful stuff. Important to hear. I'm going to take you through the findings now. It is a whistle-stop tour. You will see that the full report is a 229-page document. There's a lot to get to grips with. We do have a shorter summary report that I think you'll find helpful and very accessible. And I'm going to give you an overview of some of our key findings and recommendations. But it's really important that you read the report because there is a wealth of evidence and research and detail underlying what I'm about to tell you. Before I get into the findings, I think it's really important to address, it may seem like an obvious thing, but what do we actually mean by violence against women and girls? I found it really interesting when I read the research, what the public were telling us. There's a huge tendency for most of us when we hear the words violence against women and girls to immediately think of the worst kind of violence, physical violence, physical sexual offences, and they are certainly a significant part of violence against women and girls. However, it's a much broader range of behaviours and crimes than just that, and it's really important to understand that context. It includes the banter, the catcalling, the experiences that we have perhaps on a night out, as well as that more serious physical violence. It is the coercive control, economic control that people experience in an abusive relationship. We need to understand that full spectrum, because if we don't, it's difficult to understand how we arrive at those more serious crimes. And I will talk a little bit more about that relationship between the lower, what some might call the lower level behaviours, and the more extreme crimes that they can lead to. As I've mentioned, there are many different forms of violence against women and girls, and these are some of the ones that we may be more familiar with. I think it's really important to sort of get underneath some of those words. You know, stalking, for example, can be online. Increasingly, stalking is experienced online. Domestic abuse, as I said, isn't just physical abuse. It's important that we understand that also includes emotional, psychological abuse, coercive control. So it's important that we understand what lies beneath each of these terms. I think the Minister and the Assistant Minister very helpfully set the background to the task force, and I'm incredibly grateful for Constable Shenton Stone's. Actually, it takes guts to bring forward a proposition like that when initially you're perhaps greeted with, well, why is this? This is not a problem in Jersey. It takes real guts, and it's thanks to you, Constable, that we have this report, and also for the hard work that Deputy Dublé and the Minister too have been sort of focusing on and campaigning for many, many years. But thanks to that bravery, we do have our task force. We were given 3 broad objectives. One was to conduct research so that we could better understand the nature, the prevalence the context of violence against women and girls in Jersey and how it's experienced by different women and girls. We were also asked to examine the existing legal framework, and we have received some very vital support from the Law Officers Department and other professionals in doing that. And importantly, we looked beyond Jersey to try and understand what other jurisdictions are doing, what works in other jurisdictions to reduce violence against women and girls. What learning can we take from that? And we've had a very deep piece of research conducted in that respect. Finally, we were asked to come up with a set of recommendations, and indeed we have 77 of them, all of them important, and I will talk you through some of those as we go through my presentation. Gosh, something's going on next door. In terms of our research methodology, you may recall our public call for evidence. We asked the public for their experiences and their views through an online survey. We also, and that was open to men and women. We also asked people to share their own stories. There was another opportunity online for people to share in their own words, their own experiences of violence against women and girls. And you may recall the heat map. Again, the public had an opportunity to go online and pinpoint where in Jersey they felt unsafe, to suggest why that might be, and also to perhaps propose how they could be made to feel safer. I think it's important to point out that the heat map it's not a map indicating actual crimes, it's people's perception of where they feel unsafe. But that perception is really, really important. It's because that we perceive danger in certain parts of the island that we as women and girls modify our behaviour. Every day we take steps to protect ourselves because we perceive that we are unsafe. And that means that every day we are limiting our opportunities, how we present ourselves, where we go. I'm sure I'm not the only one who's walked down the street with my keys in my hand. I mean, a pointless protection, but many of us have done it. You know, we're very conscious when we go out in the dark that we may be unsafe. We take extra measures to protect ourselves. We adapt our behaviour in a way that men and boys simply don't have to. So actually understanding perceptions of feeling unsafe or where we might be unsafe is incredibly important. And if we can change some of those perceptions, which some may be based in reality, some may not, that's an important step on the journey. Very importantly, we engaged with victims and survivors, with young people, and I'm really pleased that we have a number of those young people in the room today, and professionals working in the sphere of violence against women and girls. We engaged with them through one-to-one interviews and with focus groups. I say we. It was incredibly important that the anonymity of those people was protected. People were simply not going to share their stories if that story was not treated confidentially. It was also very important that we had experienced professionals managing those focus groups and interviews. So one of the first things that we did was to find an independent partner. And again, very particular to Jersey, it was important that that independent partner was not from Jersey. We're a very small community. Everybody knows each other. So and I'll tell you a little bit more about our partner in a minute, but we appointed Ava from the UK and have been very pleased with their support and input in this regard. As I said, we spent some time mapping the entire system, and I keep using this word system. It's all-encompassing. From that, I mean everything that provides a framework to our lives here in Jersey. So schools and education, healthcare, criminal justice system, support services, It was a huge piece of work, and we were grateful for the support we received from other partners in Jersey to enable us to do that. We've had some very helpful engagement with other jurisdictions. I was particularly, I was blown away by some of the work going on in Australia, actually. Some really helpful research to help form our recommendations. And we engaged with a huge number of professionals across this sphere, not just within the task force, a task force of 20 people who have brought great, not just expertise and commitment to this profession, but also passion. It's been an absolute privilege working with them, and we have a few of them here today on our panel. But we have engaged broadly with professionals in this sphere. Engaging with a community around such a difficult, sensitive subject is not easy. I'm conscious that there will still be communities who we have been unable to access. This report is the start of the journey, and it's really important that engagement continues, and we have to work hard at that. But I'm really pleased with the data set that we have achieved. Hundreds of people, and adults and young people, have engaged with us through our various different mediums. And I'm also really pleased with the diversity of that data set too, particularly through with the support of professionals in this sphere. We have been able to engage with people who might not otherwise feel comfortable speaking to us. So we have quite a representative data set overall. And yes, that remarkable figure of 1,800 young people, there's some very, very strong messages for us to listen to from this particular group. As I say, we engaged with two independent research providers, IFF Research, who helped us with our survey, and of course, very importantly, AVA, Against Violence and Abuse. They had a very difficult task, engaging with some very vulnerable people, and I thank them very much for their help with our research in that regard. So, on to the findings. I mean, Deputy Dublé alluded to the fact that there are a number of reports available to you to access online. I'm going to take you through the headlines, if you like. I'd like to, if I can. Here we go. Finally. Okay, so before I get into the findings, I think it's really important to explain what we mean by this conducive context. It's a phrase that features within our research. It's a really important one, actually. Violence against women and girls doesn't just happen. The conducive context defines the setting in which violence against women and girls is enabled. It's where acts of violence and abuse become accumulation of a continuous series of events, patterns of behaviour, cultural expectations that create an environment wherein violence against women and girls is more likely to happen and far more difficult to challenge. As I alluded to right at the start, violence against women and girls isn't an issue for Jersey alone. It's a global issue. However, we have a very specific conducive context in Jersey, and it's really important to understand that context because it enables us to understand how violence against women and girls is enabled here, and actually what the barriers are to preventing it. So there are sort of four broad areas that we have uncovered in our research. One is around the culture, and actually our evidence indicates that gender inequality in Jersey is pervasive. It is a part of our culture. Misogyny is a part of our culture. And that small community context that I've already talked about works to prevent abuse being reported. People are scared to report their abuse. We found that a poor understanding of violence against women and girls, and again I mentioned that at the start, of what it really means and looks like in Jersey is also a barrier. That's an ignorance across the community, but also quite worryingly amongst some professionals working in this sphere too. A lack of data on the prevalence of violence against women and girls in Jersey is a barrier that this report starts to unlock. We uncovered a very significant lack of trust in key institutions, a belief that these institutions, whether that be the courts, the police, even some support services, teachers sometimes, a trust in key institutions to take violence against women and girls seriously and to hold perpetrators to account. We also identified a lack of coordinated partnership working across services, and we have identified gaps in our legislative framework. Those together, that lack of coordinated partnership working and the gaps in our legislation, undermine our capacity as an island to respond to violence and abuse against women and girls. You've seen and heard some of these statistics already. I think they're pretty shocking. It's my view that these are the tip of the iceberg in terms of women's experiences, quite possibly. It's very difficult to share traumatic experiences, but quite clearly our data is telling us that violence against women and girls is hugely prevalent, and there are some shocking statistics there that virtually all of our survey respondees had experienced some kind of sexual harassment. A quarter of those respondees had experienced the most extreme violence, rape or attempted rape. It's quite a shocking figure. And, you know, personally, the fact that half of our young people, those aged 11 to 25, told us that they have experienced some kind of violence against women and against them because of their gender. That's not a statistic we can afford to ignore. Going into the system, as I keep referring to it, I'm going to sort of pull out some of the key findings within that. Starting with criminal justice. We found this lack of trust in these services and across criminal justice to be a major barrier to tackling violence against women and girls. And also those gaps in legislation and best practice that I have already alluded to. In terms of recommendations, there are many. Perhaps the one that will stand out most to you when you read the recommendations is the independent review of the criminal justice system that we advocate for. We've already been asked why. Why is this necessary? Our review could only go so far. What we found is that the evidence provided by women and girls in our community is similar to that being highlighted in the UK, highlighted in some very well-respected, credible pieces of research. Jersey and the UK are constitutionally separate, they're different. However, our criminal justice system is closely modelled on the UK. If women in Jersey are telling us that they are experiencing similar flaws in the criminal justice system to those identified as needing to be fixed in the UK, then it's highly likely that we have at least some of those flaws in our system here. I will say that we have made great progress in recent years across parts of the criminal justice system. We have seen some really important new legislation, the Domestic Abuse Act that came in earlier this year. We have seen an increase in recent months in rape convictions, and that is that is something to applaud. My hope actually is, as well as identify the flaws in our criminal justice system, this actually will serve to increase the sort of damaged trust that I've already described. By opening ourselves up to further review, it sends a very powerful message to women and girls that this really matters, we want to do better. But if it also highlights the progress too, then that is a powerful message that will go a long way to improving that trust. So for me, this recommendation is really important. As I have said, we have seen progress. The other recommendation we've highlighted here are emergency barring orders, and it's really interesting speaking to Hugh and members of the police. For them, this is an important recommendation. Our legislative mapping and research with professionals has highlighted how the absence of emergency barring orders within the new domestic abuse law is actually undermining the ability of police to protect victims of domestic abuse from their abuser whilst they gather evidence to make an arrest. So this is a very important recommendation. Our research also highlighted difficulties in prosecuting stalking. So we have recommendations around strengthening the law in that regard as well. Healthcare. Now, some of us may be really lucky with our experiences with our GP and in other interactions with the healthcare system that we have had someone there who understands the signs of violence against women and girls and how to help. But our data has made clear that is not a consistent experience. And there is a certain lack of awareness and training amongst professionals working in healthcare. Actually, it's really important that we improve that awareness and understanding, because often a healthcare professional is the first person that a victim may meet who is able to help them. It's really important that they are able to spot the signs of violence and abuse, and also understand how to signpost that individual to support and the care that they need. They're also, in terms of training and awareness, it's important to understand that there are links to mental health and violence and abuse, and also those who may be struggling with alcohol and addiction. There's a higher likelihood that they are victims of abuse too. So this is really important knowledge for our healthcare workers. Very much our recommendations around this are about improving that knowledge and understanding and making the required care far more accessible. The immigration system, I know this is something that's been in the news recently, some important research into the experiences of migrants in our community with less than 5 years residency. It perhaps is no surprise then that our research highlighted that differences in residential status can lead to power imbalances in relationships. And we had quite a bit of evidence forthcoming from people with experience of this. We found that those with less than 5 years residency or whose ability to stay in Jersey was connected to their partner's work permit were very fearful of reporting abuse. They talked about, and it is evident, that there is a lack of access to the support that these victims of abuse might need: financial support, housing support. The way the current immigration system works makes it far more difficult for those people to access it. We also found quite a number of concerns in the workplace. There will be employers sitting in this room. You have a very important role to play in tackling violence against women and girls in many ways. But we have evidence that demonstrated that it was very difficult for migrants with less than 5 years residency to access justice if they were required, if they had had an issue at work, if they'd experienced VAWG at work, and we're trying to pursue that through the tribunals. That lack of work permit to live here means that quite often they were forced to leave the island before they could reach a conclusion or see through that claim. The really concerning thing, and if you speak to somebody like Lisa and her colleagues at Frida, are the stories of people who felt they had no choice but to return to their abuser because they had no financial support. Their ability to stay on the island was hugely limited. So they had no option but to return to their abuser, and often there are children involved in those circumstances. An easy recommendation for us is that financial support should be made available to these people. And we have a number of other recommendations too. Support services, and I've already alluded to the fact that there are some amazing support services and there are some brilliant people working in those support services, day in, day out, helping victims and survivors working in very difficult conditions and circumstances for very little thanks and recognition. I'll never forget one of our AVA researchers describing a traumatised workforce. So, you know, I think in all of this we need to recognise that and thank those really hard-working support services. However, our evidence does highlight some concerns amongst the support services too. One of those is the lack of specialist counselling available for victims to aid their long-term recovery. Incredibly difficult to access that counselling. Much easier if you can afford to pay for it. So there is an inequality there too. We found that even amongst those working in this sphere, there was sometimes a poor understanding of aspects of violence against women and girls, particularly coercive control and economic abuse. We were really worried from our survey with young people that many young people didn't know where to go if they needed to access support. 59% of the young people surveyed had never heard of Dewberry House, 44% didn't know about Jersey Action Against Rape, the 44% had not heard of Jersey domestic abuse support. So this lack of knowledge is really preventing them from getting the help that they need. Our researchers also highlighted a lack of confidence amongst those working in support services in managing perpetrators. Around a quarter of those interviewed said that they lacked that confidence. And actually one of the key messages from AVA is that we really need to focus on perpetrator management if we want to tackle VAWG. And that's not just about the sentence that and the punishment that a perpetrator might receive. It's also about support and rehabilitation too. And what happens when a perpetrator leaves prison, for example. So there are many issues tied up in that particular point. An important recommendation is a gap analysis so that we can fully understand, you know, where we are missing vital support and rectify that. And that will require investment too. And already I think some schools are doing some really good work to promote a better understanding of the support services available to young people. Family courts. I think it's important to say that we weren't specifically asking people questions around these different parts of the system. The evidence provided to us was proactive. And we did receive quite a bit of evidence around experiences of the family courts. And in the same way as I've talked about the criminal justice system, our researchers identified parallels between our research and the experiences being shared with us by women and girls in Jersey with experiences in the UK family courts. A particularly important piece of research that we have extensively analysed is the harm panel review report, for example. So the fact that there are parallels between systems that are separate but similar models suggests that there are flaws that need to be further investigated in Jersey. It's the reason why we have advocated for an independent review of the family court system. We also received feedback that people felt that their domestic abuse allegations were dismissed. There was a perception that parental alienation, this was a commonly held perception, parental alienation could be used to silence allegations of domestic abuse, and that perpetrators could actually use the courts to continue their abuse and control of victims. I've used the word perception there, but again, perception is incredibly important. Much of that perception is supported by evidence, but even where it is a perception, if we want to improve trust, if we want to improve outcomes, it's really important that we understand that perception. What is behind it? How can we improve that perception and experience? So, to the future. Sounds dramatic, doesn't it? Well, this is really, addressing violence against women and girls is really all about cultural change. I've talked a lot about systemic issues, and that is part of it, but it's much broader than that. We all have a part to play in changing that culture. We've identified a number of ways in which we can work to creating a culture where violence against women and girls is reduced and women and girls receive better support. We advocate improving the knowledge and awareness of everybody through educational campaigns. This isn't just in schools, this is for all of us. Our data highlighted how poor our understanding actually is. We need to ensure that the media report responsibly. And we had a media audience this morning, and I invited them to consider this and help us on this front. And we are helping them by providing a media toolkit. The media has a big part to play in this, and responsible reporting, really considering their headlines, the stories they are sharing and how they're reporting them is really key. Very importantly, we need to ensure that men and boys are engaged in this. Violence against women and girls is not just a women's issue. And if it's left to us alone to change the culture, it's not going to happen. We need men and boys, and this is happening in our schools, and we're going to hear from some young men shortly. We need to ensure that they understand the issues and that they are equipped and empowered to challenge abuse and violence against women and girls when they see it. That's not easy to do, but we need to empower men to be able to do that too, whether it be calling out inappropriate banter, in the pub or in the workplace or amongst their friends, or whether it is because they are a professional working in a particular sphere and they have an opportunity to improve that system. We really need everybody to listen, hear the voices in this report. We do need to continue the hard work in schools. It's quite shocking in the report how early this VAWG conducive behaviour starts. When you hear some of the testimonies from young people, it's quite heartbreaking. I mean, stories of 11-year-old girls in their school uniform being catcalled by other boys, but also by grown adults. Girls in school being told to be careful about what they're wearing because it's not fair on the boys and it's not fair on the male teachers. I'm not making these up. These are our stories that have been relayed to us by young people. Very importantly, we need an overarching violence against women and girls strategy, a meaningful violence against women and girls strategy that is able to coordinate work across the services and sectors to address violence against women and girls. And I am confident, having heard from our ministers, and I'm so pleased to see our Chief Minister here today, I know she is supportive, that we will see that meaningful strategy. So it is about individuals, each and every one of us, considering what we can do to change this culture. It's about organisations looking at the way they approach violence against women and girls, whether their policies, whether their practices perhaps may present a barrier. Communities too, considering talking about these issues. And it's only that way that we will achieve that societal change that we need to see if we want to address violence against women and girls in the long term. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. So I'm Jackie Patton. I'm going to be facilitating our Q&A today. I'm going to just introduce our panel and then we'll kick off with a few questions before we open it up to the floor. Just a reminder that this session is being live streamed today. So if you do pop your hand up, please wait until Charlie or Emma brings you a microphone, because otherwise we won't be able to hear you. So we are joined on our panel by Kate Wright, the chair of the Independent Taskforce for Violence Against Women and Girls, Hugh Williams, Detective Inspector from the Jersey Police. We've also got Lisa Leventhal, who is the CEO of Frida, formerly the Jersey Women's Refuge, and Vic Tanner-Davy, the CEO of Liberate. Thank you for joining us today and for being a part of our task force as well to date. So I'm going to kick us off. What do you think is your biggest learning from the research? Because this has been a year of research, and not just the people on the stage, but 20 people have been involved in this task force over the last year. Hugh, I'm going to start with you, if that's okay. What do you think your biggest learning has been so far this year with this research?
Well, thank you, and I'll say just from the outset, it's been an absolute privilege to be part of the task force this year. I've learnt so much, and it's been incredible to just be a part of so many inspiring women and girls particularly, but so many people that kind of got a common goal to make life better here. The biggest learning for me is the extent of it, I think, in Jersey, and that it's a societal problem. So yes, new laws and powers are important, and we'll talk more about that shortly, no doubt. But we can't arrest our way out of this problem. I'd love to see the investment much earlier on in terms of preventing it, because for my part, I think the police should be judged on not how they deal and how much they detect, but the absence of crime. So we prevent victims. And just, it's inspired me to go on and learn outside of the task force around why is it that disproportionately men and boys hurt women and girls. And it's important to understand that, of course, most perpetrators are men, fact, and we can talk about that shortly. But not all men are perpetrators. And people can get a little bit defensive about that. But all I ask is that we give this issue the attention it deserves. We isolate that group of people that are causing harm against women and girls, and that we find a way together, because this is going to take years for a culture shift, to head towards that common goal of people being able to walk the streets and feeling safe. Perception is huge. It's really important to the police. It's not just about crime and recording it, it's around people feeling safe. So yeah, a long answer there, but hopefully goes some way to explain how much it's been a really enjoyable journey.
Thank you, Hugh. What about you, Lisa? What do you think your biggest learning has been from the research process?
Well, Frida is the voice of survivors of domestic abuse in Jersey, so the report doesn't come as a huge surprise to us, because it's something that we deal with day in and day out. The survivors are always trying to manage the barriers that are up against them in the criminal justice system, the family court system and government departments. But I think the The great learning from the task force is how we've all come together, like Hugh says, and we've all got a really strong passion and willingness to help open those doors and make that experience for women much better so that it protects the women and children.
It's been really interesting, hasn't it? I was really privileged to spend a bit of time with the task force and to see all of the different groups, all of the different partner agencies, charities together has been pretty amazing. Obviously, a lot of the findings are quite hard-hitting. Vic, what do you think is the most troubling finding for you? What have you been most troubled by?
I mean, I think the results from the young people, so the 1,800 young people, boys and girls, the fact that young people don't necessarily know how broad the definition is and therefore don't realise that they've been a victim of this behaviour. And if you don't know you've been a victim, you can't report it. And then I think one of the things that struck me and has stayed with me from the AVA researchers, they said that we're gaslighting our young people. And what they meant by that was that we're perpetrating this idea that Jersey is this super safe place to live. And it's not safe for a lot of people here. And if you're being abused, the myth that this is safe is very damaging because you begin to think that you're the only person this is happening to. And that then hands more power to the abuser because you don't report it. So we need to be honest. This is happening here. It happens in Jersey. And once you admit that problem, you can start to address it.
Thank you. Kate, you talked us through our findings, you talked us through some of the recommendations. If you had to pick one, and I know that this is a difficult question, but if you had to pick one that you would love to see taken forward, what would you like to see prioritised?
I think they're all important. I think it has to be the independent review of the criminal justice system in the family courts. I think the potential to improve the system so that victims are confident that they will receive justice, that they're confident that they will be supported through that process, that they understand the outcomes, is incredibly powerful. I think it will unlock a lot of the barriers and in turn it will serve to shift some of the cultural issues.
So I'm going to open it up to the floor. Do we have any questions? Please raise your hands. We have a lady down here. She's just going to bring you the microphone. You can put your hand down. I know which one you are. Here you go.
Thank you. I'm Dorcas Taylor. I'm Team Manager for Children's Services.
Lovely.
I've only been on the island 6 weeks, so
wow.
I've got 4 questions,
okay.
if that's okay.
Can you hit me with one, and then we can come back to you if we have time.
My first one, which is quite an important one, is how is this strategy linking in with the work that is going on the island in respect of child sexual exploitation and child criminal exploitation? Because I see them as being inextricably linked.
Yeah, and we had Natalie Spooner on in our video there at the beginning. Kate, do you want to take that one?
Natalie leads that incredibly important piece of work. So, and she has been part of our task force from the offset. And I know she really welcomed the findings. She will be using them to help. I can actually see
Natalie's in the room. She's nodding vigorously.
Oh, brilliant! Natalie, do you want to say anything?
I just spotted her there. I thought that's.
Thank you. I've been part of the task force right from the very start. I've presented to the task force in terms of the direction of the strategy, working very closely with Charlie Hackwell in terms of looking at how we can, once we've done this launch, we can work together to look at all of the key objectives, the objectives under the child sexual abuse and exploitation strategy, and also closely with the Building a Safer Community framework, because they all sit together, and the Children and Young Persons Plan for the island. This is our real opportunity to align key pieces of work and make change for the island. So thank you for having me as part of your task force.
Thanks, Natalie. Right, I know you've got 3 more, so we're going to come back to you, but I'm just going to open it up in case anybody else has any questions. Yeah, we've got a gentleman here on the end. Would you pop your hand up again just so that Emma can see you? Lovely. Thank you. Perfect.
Thank you. First of all, can I say thank you to the panel for carrying out the work? I know it was a difficult piece of work, and I look forward to looking at the detail. You've talked a lot about, quite rightly, I think, the dealing with the fallout and the response and looking at improving our systems, but it's a difficult question. Have you given consideration to the causes of male violence? So to contextualise, it's males, quite rightly, we've been told, who perpetuate the violence, and they are also violent against men, and it's a cycle, I think, and women find themselves as victims in that as well. It's a big question, but what are the causes of male violence, even from a young age, and how do we address that as a society?
Hugh, would you like to jump in on that one?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Really useful question to open up some dialogue around that, actually. Some of the research I've done, just being motivated by time on the task force, is looking at the cyclical nature of these issues. And it's already been said that this is not just a women and girls issue. It's absolutely a men and boys issue. And anyone that thinks any differently is just dreaming. And you're either part of the problem, whether you speak out as a part of the problem, or whether you say nothing and you condone it, or you're a part of the solution for it. And we know that boys that experience and witness domestic abuse at home are more likely to go on and perpetrate themselves. What are other factors which cause, as you say, the violence and inequality which drives VAWG? Media, entertainment, access to the internet, perhaps without the proper controls. It's huge. It's an absolute monster of an issue. And that's why I'm confident that we have to come together. And it's going to take years. We need to be realistic about that. It's a culture shift. But I think an academic bit of work beyond this is important to understand anything that's unique and context in Jersey, because you've got to understand the problem. You've got to analyse it before you just throw a load of responses at it. Hopefully that answers your question in some way, shape or form.
Does anyone else on the panel want to jump in? Has anyone got any other views on that?
Well, one of the things I would say is that I think the schools piece, the recommendation around education and starting very young in schools with age-appropriate content about the importance of telling our young people how to be a well-rounded citizen, how to be kind, how to avoid the online content that's unhelpful, and how to value their classmates as individuals. And I think that whole piece, and it's probably wider than just talking about women. It's talking about inclusion. I think that piece goes some way as well to ensuring that we're bringing up a generation that understand this stuff, and we shouldn't be afraid of tackling these issues with young people.
We've got a question. Oh, there you go. Emma's right by. Thank you.
Hi there. This is a question that followed up on the...
Oh, hold on one sec. I don't think that microphone's on.
Hello?
Oh, there we go. You're there. Sorry.
Yes, this is a question that just follows up on the aspect of education. You mentioned that culture changes being paramount in reducing VAWG and education being a part of that. Is there any research evidence to suggest that educating males against VAWG actually reduces it?
Oh, great question. Got anyone? Kate, would you like to jump in on that?
I mean, there has been extensive work in other jurisdictions. I mentioned Australia earlier. We have engaged with a fantastic organisation called VAWG, and they've done a huge amount of work around education, including education in schools. And they do have data to demonstrate that it works. And actually, in a minute, you are going to be hearing from some young people from Jersey schools. And it's really important they're here today. We actually turned to them as a task force for advice. Victoria College and Jersey College for Girls have been doing a lot of work before the task force was commissioned to address some of those issues and look at how schools can help to educate children to develop positive relationships between boys and girls and respect and kindness. And the work's phenomenal. And they were instrumental. They worked with Ava to design the Young People's Survey. So this is very much their report as it is ours. Sorry, Tara.
Yeah. Can we take the mic back? Yeah, lovely. She's coming.
Keeping it fit.
Sorry, it's just a follow-up question on that. Surely any research that has been done now needs a kind of longitudinal results to see if there's any effect in the future of its kind of efficacy.
Absolutely, and these it's really important. You know, part of this is understanding how we can monitor the impact of our recommendations when they are implemented, and you know, clearly the educational piece is part of that. It's essential that we monitor the impact, that we shift, we evolve, we adapt, and the context in which we're living is constantly shifting and evolving. We are going to have to keep adapting.
So just a bit of a question on the Australian research. Has that been longitudinal?
Sorry?
Is that sort of longitudinal? You were mentioning the Australian research.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's much research that has been around for years and years, but we are monitoring it, and they have demonstrated the positive impact of a lot of those pieces of work that they've been implementing. It does appear to be having an effect, but you're right. It takes a long time to change culture, and we're talking about deep-rooted gender inequality and misogyny. But it is incredibly important that we do monitor that.
Thank you for your questions. Hands up, anybody? Oh, we've got one here, Emma. Emma? No, down the front. Sorry. Oh, we'll go to the back and then we'll come down the front. Sorry, because you've... We'll start with Mars at the back. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. I was just wondering in this exploration how much the definition of what is regarded as a woman comes into this, because when we are talking about culture and things, then the part of this is like perhaps men thinking I'm a man, that means I'm entitled to do X, or a woman thinking I'm a woman, I'm not entitled to do X, and then the water having been kind of muddied, and it has become controversial in terms of, and the possibility of what some people might think of men saying I'm a woman, I can go into this area that's reserved for women, and perhaps making those places less safe. So where did you come out in all of this? Is this part of the...
Hold on a minute. Can I ask...
I just want the question again. Can you just give me the question again? I just missed the question.
So where did where did the panel really generally in this work come out in terms of whether there needs to be further work in terms of defining what is a woman and a man, in terms of the cultural change, and in terms of making things safe for whatever a woman is in the context of whatever you are talking about.
Lovely. Okay, thank you, Mar.
I'm a bit confused about your question, to be honest, because if you look at our summary report, you'll see that what I think you're asking really wasn't evidenced as a concern at all. I urge you to read the report and to focus your energy and your questions on the very real issues and evidence that thousands of women and girls, and men and boys too, provided to the research, but primarily women and girls. So please do read the report and focus on the evidence within it.
Thank you. I'm going to ask, we've got a lady here with the microphone already. Yes, we'll go to you next.
So you spoke about the fact that you need a review into the criminal justice system. Have you thought about alternatives to reporting, such as SARC centres like they have in the UK?
We do have, in fact, Lisa, you might be well, and also the police better qualified to answer that question with direct dealings, but I'm glad you asked it.
Yeah, so we're proud to have Sexual Assault Referral Centre, SARC. It's called Dewberry House. So they're very much online, and they're incredible people who work there. And what's great about the SARC and what's really powerful is it's still your choice as to how far you want to take it, and you get to learn actually how and whether or not you want to navigate, the criminal justice system with support. But you're able to go there, secure evidence, get the right support, medical advice, further signposting and therapy, and you get to make a choice as to whether or not the SARC share that with the police and whether that initiates an investigation. So anyone that hasn't had time or hasn't come across the SARC or Dewberry House, I'd encourage you strongly, go online, have a look. There's some fantastic people there that are ready and waiting to take your call and would like to help.
Lisa, do you want to add anything to that?
Yes, and obviously the same for Frida. We operate a safe house where women who are suffering from domestic abuse can come and be protected, and we're able to take them with their children, their pets, and that's available in the community.
Thank you for that question.
We've got a lady here. Thank you.
I'd like to ask a question of Deputy Helen Miles, if that's okay.
Are you happy to take a question? Lovely, thank you.
Thank you, Minister. I was just wondering, how will government ensure that the report isn't forgotten, and how are you going to make sure that the recommendations are properly supported and funded, please?
Lovely. If we could pass the mic over, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's a very good question. From a funding perspective, we have assurance that funding to deliver any of the recommendations that are approved is in place. Although it's outside the government plan for 2024, we do have assurances that will take place. I think it is a very good question because I think I've lost count of reports that sit on shelves and gather dust. But what I can do is give you my personal assurance that this report and the recommendations within it will be carefully considered and taken forward. And we have a number of mechanisms for that. One of the big ones is the Building a Safer Community framework, which will be published towards the end of this year. We wanted to make sure that the VAWG report wasn't held up for the publication of that framework. And within that framework, what it does is take a 10-year time span. And that in itself is useful because it spans changes of government. And what it does is focus on areas such as early intervention, combating social inclusion, and indeed all the areas that your VAWG report has touched upon. And there has been some questions about a VAWG strategy. We're going to think quite carefully about that because actually what we have the ability to do within the Building a Safer Community framework is actually put a VAWG lens right over the top of that. So we will be bringing into the BAS framework the child sexual abuse and exploitation strategy, also the domestic abuse strategy. And what we will then have over the top is all of those strategies that are delivered will be delivered with an understanding of a VAWG lens on top. Does that answer your question? Fab.
Great. And it's just a reminder as well that it's all of our jobs to make sure we keep shouting about it and talking about it and asking questions of the people in government so that they can't forget it. Oh, mic's on again.
I think one thing that is potentially different with this assembly is we have nearly 50% who are women.
Yeah.
All of us as women, if you look at our manifestos, all expressed concerns about safety. We are all acutely aware of the misogyny that is actually inherent in our legal system. I won't mention independent taxation, but I never lose the chance to mention it. As you know, independent taxation debate lately was just narrowly defeated, something that a lot of us have been very unhappy about. And I hope that politicians that use the term, "Oh, I think this chattel argument is wearing a bit thin," actually take time to read this report and to understand the extent of misogyny and the extent of discrimination against women that is inherent due to flaws in our legal system.
Thank you. Okay, we've got a question at the back. Thank you.
Oh, hello there. You touched on, Kate, a bit earlier about the media, and I think they're obviously really, really key. We see a lot of stuff that comes out in the media, which reporting on men and reporting on women, the headline will be completely different. Did you ever give consideration to have someone on the panel from media, and how do you plan to work with media going forward?
Great question,
Yeah.
Kate.
We held a workshop actually with professionals from Jersey's media and involved them in our research and in our discussion. We have provided also a toolkit to the media. It was the anonymity, and I am sure that the media that we would have invited into the task force would be entirely trustworthy, but it was really important that we were able to very clearly show to people contributing evidence that their data would be managed carefully. And I think if there had been a sort of long-term media representative that might have probably entirely unnecessarily have caused a little concern, but we have actively involved local media, and we have also researched the role of media in other jurisdictions as well. So it's been a very key part. Because you're right, you know, the way victims and women are presented in the media can be it can be enabling of violence against women and girls. It's really important.
Thank you for that question. Got one here, thank you.
Hi, I was just thinking with your survey that there was quite a low response out of a population of 100,000 people, and it's really positive to see that so many young people were included in the survey. But perhaps I'm more thinking about also elders in our community who perhaps may not recognise domestic abuse or have any access or visibility, or just they don't recognise it in their family unit.
Anyone on that? I think you raise a really good point. I think any online survey is always going to have its limitations in terms of who will access it, even more so when it's a sensitive and difficult subject like this. Given that, actually, I was pleasantly surprised with the response rate. It's also why it was just one part of our research. The professionals working within the task force were incredibly helpful in enabling us to access communities that would not otherwise perhaps feel comfortable to talk to our researchers. And I think we had a good engagement in that regard, and a pretty representative one, actually. However, I am conscious that there are communities, particularly the elderly, actually, who we found it incredibly difficult to access. So, this is just the start. And, underlying all our recommendations is a real need to work incredibly hard to engage with all those communities. But you make a very good point about the elderly.
I think you wanted to jump in?
Yeah, I was just going to completely agree with you. I think it is a good point. I think it just underlines the importance of how it's incumbent now on all the departments in government, other organisations, to go forward and understand more and proactively reach out to different members in our community to re-understand the issue before throwing any kind of responses at it.
Vic?
Yeah, just to pick up on Hugh's point and go.
Oh, I don't think I can hear you. Can we run a mic down to Vic? Oh, no, we should try now.
Yep, got me?
Yeah, there
yes.
You are.
Just pick on Hugh's point there, I think there is also, when you're looking at intersectionality between different groups and women, there are other issues that need to be drawn out. So this report is only the start. There needs to be work done with other communities who have those intersections with women, because their needs will be different and more complex potentially.
Thank you, that's a really good point. Right, we've got time for maybe one or two more, so this is your moment. I know you've still got three, and you're going to be my last one, don't you worry. Yeah, Kay down the front. I haven't forgotten about you. Okay, we'll have Kay. There was a lady over here with their hand up. Yeah, lovely, and then we'll come back to finish up. Thanks, Kay.
Thank you. I'm really heartened by the piece around educating younger people. I think that's fantastic and obviously very well needed. But I wonder what you think can be done to tackle the very established and pervasive culture of misogyny and this kind of notion, I think, that exists that some men have, that they don't do it, it doesn't apply to them, and therefore it's not really their problem. How do we go about tackling that as a cultural issue and to affect that change?
Lisa?
Well, I think we have to do that as a community, whether we're mothers, sisters, daughters, within the family group, but also within our workplace. And we have to raise awareness of the VAWG issues and be brave enough to have challenging conversations with people that might be in opposition to that, and feel strong enough to challenge them and take action and stand up. And in fact, Frida are doing a White Ribbon Day event, which is just that, is raising awareness about men preventing violence against women and girls. And it is to get a room full of men and women to talk about it. So it's about making it out in the community and not behind closed doors and not behind the curtain.
Hugh?
Yeah, I think understanding what VAWG is really important, which I'm really glad you spent some time on, Kate, in the beginning of the session. And people need to understand what the signs are if they're going to be able to reach out for help and get the support that they need. But it's not just about education. It's not just about one area. Again, campaigns, someone might say, well, it's just another campaign. But actually, wallpapering our community with this is what's wrong, you need to call it out, makes people comfortable with understanding actually, okay, I'm not going to be a bystander anymore. I'm actually going to stand up to this and be an upstander. And that's going to be a lonely place for people. People will be uncomfortable with that. You need to almost rehearse the words that are going to come out of your mouth for you to feel like, I'm going to stand up to this. And it's going to feel weird, but actually it's going to make a difference, because the more the people do it, the less place there is for perpetrators to hide. And so it starts with simple things, like you hear it, you call it out.
Thank you. Vic, were you going to, I can see you.
I was going to say that I think it starts at the top. And I don't mean our politicians. I mean our leaders who are in positions of power within institutions. And I think what we need to be saying is that this is a systemic, historic problem. It's not their fault. They shouldn't feel personally criticised by this report, because the moment they feel that, the defences go up. And what we don't want is the defences to go up. What we need is for the people who are at the top to have humility, to listen, to really read this and really understand where it's coming from, and to take the opportunity to make the change happen, to be the person that starts that change, and not be the person who just defends the bastion against this tirade of women. That's not going to be helpful.
Okay.
Our AVA researchers who came from the UK who are not familiar with Jersey. They've certainly never heard the term the Jersey way, but I have a quote that I've never been able to forget, and they observed to us this fragmented, male-biased, untouchable system in Jersey. This is what we live with, and the evidence in our report supports that observation of Jersey, but that's also how others are seeing us too. So, gosh, if this isn't motivation enough for our leaders to really listen and do something, then perhaps Jersey's reputation may be another hook. I hope that this will be enough.
Thank you. I'm going to go to the lady over here that had a hand up. Just pop your hand up so that Emma can see you. Lovely. Thank you.
Hi. Just a little thing where, Kate, you touched on immigration system. We have people coming over to our island to work, and yes, they've got less than 5 years residency, but what happens when they're abused? They're the ones who are scared to come forward because they're fear of losing their jobs. How do we go about helping these people?
Yeah, I mean, that's a very worrying concern, and there was strong evidence that fear of losing their job, that inability to access support, is a very real problem for some people in our community. So there are lots of questions to be asked about our immigration system and policy, some quicker wins around ensuring that people who find themselves lacking any power to protect themselves because of their immigration status are able to access the financial support that they need to leave their abuser, that they trust that if they go to the police to report the crime, that their immigration status isn't necessarily shared with immigration services, because that fear is a barrier. So we have several recommendations around improvements that need to be made to the immigration system to protect those victims. And I think you have direct experience of this, don't you, with women coming to Frida?
And Our biggest challenge is the evidential to the immigration department for them to apply successfully for the indefinite leave to remain,
Yeah.
so which is one of the recommendations.
There is, there is scope for people who can prove that they are, a victim of domestic abuse, for example, to have indefinite leave to remain on the island. But that bar is quite high. So we would be keen for them to look at the evidence and consider how we can support those women.
Vic, did you want to add something?
Yeah, the one thing I was going to add is that although we have a certain amount of protection within the domestic abuse sphere, there is very little protection if you're abused in the workplace. And the legislation is imbalanced in that sense. So somebody who has a sexual harassment claim, for example, within the workplace, who is on a 9-month contract, they have to leave within 7 days if they're turfed out of that workplace for making a complaint. Whereas we have a little bit more protection within the domestic sphere. So I think there is also something around that as well, but it's legislative change, it will take time.
Can I just offer you some comfort that when we have engaged with Customs and Immigration Services with our findings, and the police very much so, they have been very engaged and I felt, really listened to the evidence that we were providing. So that I felt positive about that engagement with them when we shared findings with them. So I certainly know from our engagement with Hugh and the States of Jersey Police, and the Chief of Police was here this morning, that they take this very seriously.
Can I just add to that? I'm not going to begin to start even trying to imagine what it's like when you're facing those kind of challenges and you stand to lose a lot more than other people do. But in my experience of now working in serious crime, the only experience I've had as a police officer working with Customs and Immigration is actually to assist people, to make sure they're able to stay on the island for longer when we come across these complex issues and we need people to work with us to investigate. I've not experienced the other side of it, but that goes to the point that actually we should be telling people that, because if that's a barrier and that's a recommendation in the report, then we should be proactive around telling people. We don't run away to Customs and Immigration when this kind of thing happens. It's not what we do. We're here to help, to get justice to people.
Oh, hold on. They won't be able to hear you.
A lot of these women are the fair and they can't do anything. Their employers normally revoke their visas, so they can't do anything about it. I mean, it's just a bit...
There's a huge piece for employers in this too. I mean, we've been talking about the immigration services, and obviously they are absolutely key, but there's a huge piece for employers in terms of understanding the context in which some of their workers are working and their rights or not on the island, but understanding good practice and behaving better.
So I'm going to wrap us up with our final question, with the lovely lady that waited with her list. You're going to have to pick your best one of the 3 that were remaining.
Okay, so I've worked in a lot of local authorities in my 40 years of being a social worker, and most of those local authorities, the focus is on the victims and the survivors. And in terms of resourcing the rehabilitation of the perpetrators, it's not there, it's not in evidence. And therefore, I feel very strongly that we're not treating the root cause. We are re-traumatising victims and survivors by the lack of support that we really offer them. And I'm not talking Jersey, I'm talking UK, but I can see it being played out here as well. And we are not focusing our energy and our resources on that rehabilitation of offenders, because until we actually break that cycle, get in there early intervention and prevention with the young people. And my other 2 questions I will email, because I'm really looking forward to hearing what you've got to say. But I just think it's so important that we do consider what are we doing to break the cycle.
And very briefly, I entirely agree, and you'll be pleased that we have a number of recommendations around perpetrator management and rehabilitation. You're absolutely right. It is clear that we need to focus on that in Jersey. You?
Yeah, can I just add, completely agree with your statement. Policing has historically focused on victims as well, from a supportive perspective, but that can sometimes be quite dangerous, can't it? In terms of actually the focus all being on them, and that breeds the victim blaming culture of it.
Because that's going to take some time.
Yeah.
So rather than waiting for the review of the justice system, we can be innovative in terms of how we as a partnership actually address this. And I'll give one very brief example. When I was working in a local authority in North Manchester, I worked very closely with the police, and we actually put together a response, which was the perpetrator was picked up straight away by the police, taken to the cells. Children's social care were out to see the children and the victim or survivor of abuse. The police said to the perpetrator, if you are willing to engage in this rehabilitation programme, we can guarantee that the actual tariff when you get in front of the court will be lower. You know, so they're kind of innovative things that we can do. Yeah.
So I've been part of cases where we've worked with probation and not waited for a conviction. And we know that something hasn't passed an evidential test to progress, unfortunately, to the justice system. And we've worked at proactively reaching out to suspects, call them offenders or convicted people, but suspects at that stage. So there is, in some small corners, it's happening now. I think the coordination of that is the important thing. And in terms of, because actions speak louder than words, don't they? I mean, the great thing of being part of this task force has been I've had a great insight early on, before today, around how the report shaped and what the recommendations look like, and what the police have done, and we will work hard with government to make sure that we integrate this so it's consistent, is we've developed our own action plan already, and some of the actions we've already achieved. So we look at not only building victim trust and confidence and creating safer spaces, we look at relentlessly pursuing offenders, and that requires a very different approach to how you investigate.
Well, I'd like you all to join me in saying thank you to our panel, who are going to thank you. And they're going to leave the stage now to make way for some wonderful young people whose names I have here. Jack Stevens, Chloe Connor, Isaac Tarrant. Sorry, Isaac. Jemima, Kalula, and Estelle. Joint. I can't read Kate's handwriting, is what we've just learnt. It's not yours. Guys, if you want to come up and take the stage. Lovely. Yeah, and they're going to share the mics. Great.
Is it on? Perfect. So we were asked to give our responses to 3 questions. So our first question was, what work have they been doing and leading at school to build positive relationships and friendships between the boys and girls, and why does it matter? So we created a charter between JCG and VIC, which aimed to build positive relationships between the 2 schools. The charter is an agreement between both schools, which is based around respectful relationships. And in order for the charter to be most effective, a joint student forum was set up with the purpose to maintain the relationships between the 2 schools, organise joint events, and review the charter each year.
To further this, we have also found joint PSHE lessons with our Year 7 students have been impactful, as well as joint PSHE for our sixth form students, discussing gender, sexuality and consent. Furthermore, our joint student forum has acted to create a more inclusive space within the colleges, implementing joint STEM days for Year 8 students to break down social barriers and social bias. In my opinion, the most poignant example of this was the JCG Vigil for Aisling Murphy. in which JCG and VIC came together in allyship, opposing violence against women and girls and preconceived gender bias.
We believe that this is important in order to create unity and to open conversations between both genders, whether this is in a single-sex school or within mixed schools. This is so that we can prepare students for life and healthy relationships post-education.
Our second question was, how did we co-design the survey and why was this work important to us? So students from both VIC and JCG were taking part in focus groups with Fee from Ava, and it was clear to us that they had us in mind, the people that the survey was going to be designed for. And we were keen to share our perspective and made many suggestions. So some concerned question framing to ensure our age group would understand exactly what was being asked, and even keeping an active engagement throughout the survey was a recurring point. So how would we represent the questions and how that could influence their engagement? And one question in particular asked participants to distinguish between acceptable and unacceptable behaviour. And when we went through this exercise as a group, we felt as if it was too clear-cut and they didn't support the idea of having those difficult conversations. And just to echo what Hugh and the Deputy Minister has said, we feel strongly about including male perspective. And it's not just an issue isolated to young women and girls, it's an issue that concerns all of us. And this sort of violence does disproportionately affect women and girls. And men oftentimes, unfortunately, are the perpetrators. And that's exactly why we have an obligation to be a part of the solution. So we understand that it's important to be a part of the conversation. And in this theme, we made many suggestions on how to improve or encourage male participation in the survey. So, for example, using inclusive language to make sure men didn't feel targeted or ostracized. And also, we helped design a preface for the male audience to accompany the already film a preface that was there, and so when they got to the survey they wouldn't feel excluded. And why was this work important to us? I think this is a deeply personal issue to all of us. We all have people that can be affected, if not ourselves. I have two sisters, but it's the same for mothers, for daughters, other family members. I don't want them to be experiencing violence in Jersey of any form, and I don't want to have to question their safety.
The third question that we were asked to consider was, what are our hopes for the future now that the report has been published? And so we need the government and key stakeholders to first of all listen to us and then take action. It's not enough to just make promises. Change has to happen. You need to show us that you care through your actions. In 2021 and 2022, there were 113 rape accusations filed, and only 5 of these went to court, and there was no convictions. This is such a discouraging statistic, and it means that people lack faith in the system. In schools, we're taught to speak up and share our experiences, but this is so hard to do when in the real world, figures like this exist on an island that's supposed to be safe. We'd like to see key legislation be introduced and implemented, and for the police to uphold this legislation in a compassionate way.
Likewise, we also hope that the government and key stakeholders can listen to and, more importantly, act upon the recommendations made. From a school perspective, we feel that the PSHE curriculum should be the same across all schools on Ireland, just the same as relationship and sex education is now a compulsory unit in the UK. Also, the PHSE curriculum should challenge gender stereotypes and teach young people how to be active bystanders. This is so that all young people feel empowered to challenge violence against women and girls.
So once I heard that a task force was being created against violence and abuse of women and girls, I, as some other people in this room, felt it was imperative to take part. We'd like to thank Fee Scott and all of those involved, such as Ava and the panel and all others, for finally involving young people's voices as a part of this discussion. And we feel so privileged to have taken part in this opportunity. It is important to us as it allows young people like ourselves to finally be heard and take part in the change for our futures by making Jersey a hopefully safer place for us all. We hope with the results of the survey to bridge the gaps of education and laws allowing women to be protected. This not only affects women, but all genders, as we aim to create a more inclusive society. Hopefully, by opening up about this subject, which has previously been seen as taboo in places such as schools and the workplace, we will allow people to realise the significance of action needed to protect women and girls. Also, we hope to educate people on what classifies as abuse, as it can take on many forms, previously mentioned by panel members. I hope that our voices are heard and our views can help result in some real change.
Goodness me, our future's in good hands, isn't it? I want to say a massive thank you, because it's no mean feat sitting up here in front of all of these people and doing that. So thank you very much. We'll ask you to go and sit down. I'm blown away by that. I knew it was a good idea to invite the young people, and I'm so pleased we did. That was phenomenal, really phenomenal. I had a whole closing speech, but I'm not going to. I think that is enough. I think, please listen to the voices in our report. Listen to the voices of our young people, and oh my goodness, ministers, when you develop your strategy, I think you need to engage with these people. That was absolutely brilliant, and I agree with Jackie, our future is in good hands. It also makes me realise just how important it is that we implement these recommendations, that in a few years' time, we're not standing here hearing how violence against women and girls is just the wallpaper to the lives of young people and women in our community. That we're not still talking about a fragmented, male-biased, untouchable system. I think if we listen to and learn from these brilliant young people, we can do that. So thank you very, very much. You're going to have to bear with me for a few minutes. I do have a long list of thank yous. This is a bit, I feel like I'm just about to receive I've just received an award. I've got a long list of thank yous, but they are really important thank yous. And I mean, so many people have been involved in getting us to this point. It's been Vic and I was saying earlier, it's been a long year, but so worth it. So apologies if I have inadvertently missed someone out here. But I'd like to say thank you once again from our brilliant students from Victoria College and Jersey College for Girls. I'd like to say thank you very much to Deputy Miles and Deputy Dublé for their, what felt to me very authentic, heartfelt, encouraging words of support and a commitment to action. Thank you. Thank you to Constable Karen Shenton-Stone, who made this report a possibility. I'd like to thank the professionals within the task force and across the system who have helped us to shape this report. The feedback has not been easy to hear, and I am very grateful that they have given us the time to engage with them around it, so thank you. I would wholeheartedly like to say thank you to the task force members, all 20 of them who helped shape this report and have been through this process every step of the way. As I said, it's been a long, difficult year. I'd especially like to thank the task force members who bravely joined the panel. It's not easy to put yourself out like that. And those who contributed to that incredibly powerful video. I'd like to thank Jackie for facilitating us so marvellously today and for providing essential independent communication advice and supports in recent weeks, and to her colleague Alex for producing such a powerful video under real pressure. They weren't given a lot of time. I'd like to say thank you to the support team, to Thomas Glover, who has attended I think every single
task force meeting and has been absolutely pivotal to us achieving this report. To Emma Matthews, who not only contending with last week's storm in terms of communication strategy, has just been invaluable support to us. Today simply wouldn't have happened without those people behind the scenes. I'd like to say a huge thank you to all of you for coming here today to show your support for this vital piece of work. It's really important. I've saved my most important thank yous. They're all important, but these really are important. I've saved my most important thank yous until last, and those are for Tara Murphy and Charlie Hackwill, our support officers, whose immense efforts, resilience, intelligent research skills, morale-boosting support, Charlie's incredible writing skills, means that they really were the powerhouse behind this report, and I am simply in awe of them, and I am so heartened that Charlie is going to be continuing this work. Finally, I'd like to say a really heartfelt thank you to the many victims and survivors and young people who bravely relived their experiences, and some of those were hugely traumatic, to share their stories, to trust us with their stories, and to enable us to collectively listen and understand those experiences for the first time. I really hope we haven't let them down, and I really hope we don't let them down. So thank you very much. And I hope you go away from today thinking about what you can do to change that culture and make a real difference in the long term to those victims and survivors. Thank you.
Take a look at my girlfriend. She's the only one I got. Not much of a girlfriend. Never seem to get a lot. Take a jumbo, cross the water, like to see America. See the girls in California, I'm hoping it's going to come true. There's not a lot I can do. Could we have kippers for breakfast? Mommy dear, they got to have them in Texas, 'cause everyone's a millionaire. I'm a winner, I'm a sinner, do you want my autograph? I'm a loser, I'm a joker, I'm playing my jokes upon you. There's nothing better to do. Don't you look at my girlfriend, she's the only one I got. Not much of a girlfriend, never seem to get